On the morning of May 8th, 2026, 14,000 people found themselves stranded inside Russian airports. Not because of bad weather, not because of a technical fault, not because of a labor strike, because of Ukrainian drones. 13 airports across southern Russia suspended all operations simultaneously after a Ukrainian drone struck the building that controls all air traffic across Russia's entire southern region, the Aeronavigatsiya South Russia Navigation Center in Rostov-on-Don. At Moscow's three major airports, Domodedovo, Vnukovo, and Sheremetyevo, over 450 flights were delayed or canceled in a single day. The worst disruption to Russian civil aviation since the start of 2026. Passengers slept on terminal floors. Some waited more than 12 hours without information. Others had been there since the previous day, because this was not the first time. According to verified reporting from Euromaidan Press and confirmed by Russia's own transport ministry, this was the fourth consecutive wave of Moscow airport disruptions since the beginning of May alone. And here is the strategic reality that most coverage of this story missed entirely. The drones did not create Russia's aviation crisis. They revealed it. Welcome to Global Faultlines, where we track the forces shaping the world beneath the surface of daily events. Today we are examining something that looks like a war story, but is actually a story about the structural collapse of a major power, visible in its airports, its grounded aircraft, and its inability to keep its own civilian fleet in the air. The picture that emerges from the verified data is one of an aviation industry in freefall, and the drones are simply turning on the lights. Let us start with the verified facts of what happened on May 8th. According to Russia's own transport ministry, confirmed by TASS, the Moscow Times, and Al Jazeera, a Ukrainian drone struck the administrative building of the Southern Russia Air Navigation Branch in Rostov-on-Don. This is the central control facility that manages all civil air traffic across Russia's entire southern zone. When it went down, 13 airports suspended operations simultaneously. Astrakhan, Vladikavkaz, Volgograd, Gelendzhik, Grozny, Krasnodar, Makhachkala, Magas, Mineralny Vody, Nalchik, Sochi, Stavropol, and Elista. Russia's civil aviation regulator, Rosaviatsia, initially issued a notice that airports in southern Russia could be suspended until May 12th, 4 full days. That notice was later quietly retracted. At Moscow's airports, 30 or more drones were shot down on approach to the capital between midnight and noon on May 7th alone, according to Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin's own Telegram channel. Russia's defense ministry confirmed that 347 Ukrainian drones had been intercepted overnight on May 7th, a figure close to a national record. On May 8th, the defense ministry reported a further 264 drones intercepted. The result for Moscow's airports was the largest single-day disruption of 2026. Over 450 flights delayed or canceled across Domodedovo, Vnukovo, and Sheremetyevo. Passengers spending the night on terminal floors. 12-hour waits with no official information or contingency plans communicated to travelers. Now, here's what makes this more than a war story. Aviation in Ukraine has been completely suspended since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022. Ukrainian civilians have had no civilian air travel for over 4 years. Russia, the country that launched this war, is now experiencing repeated disruptions to its own aviation. But unlike Ukraine, Russia's airports are not being shut down only by external attack. They're being shut down by a combination of drone strikes and a pre-existing structural crisis that Western sanctions have been quietly accelerating for years. Before February 2022, Russia operated between 1,287 and 1,800 Western-manufactured commercial aircraft. Boeing and Airbus planes represented 67% of the fleet, and they accounted for approximately 95% of all passenger traffic. When Western sanctions were imposed following Russia's full-scale invasion, those supply chains were severed overnight. Russia could no longer legally purchase new aircraft from Boeing or Airbus. It could no longer access certified spare parts through official channels. It could no longer send aircraft to authorized maintenance facilities in Europe or North America. Russia's response was to steal the problem away temporarily. Putin seized hundreds of Western aircraft that were physically located on Russian territory at the time the sanctions hit. aircraft belonging to international leasing companies from Ireland, the United States, and other countries, effectively confiscating them and registering them under Russian aviation law. He gambled that the war would end quickly, that sanctions would collapse, and that he could return to normal. The war did not end quickly, and the aircraft he seized are now falling apart. According to analysis from Oliver Wyman's Global Fleet Forecast, Russia's commercial fleet is already flying 28% fewer hours and cycles than it was in 2019. By 2033, Russia's fleet is projected to be 25% smaller than it was before the invasion. The Aviation Safety Network reported in March 2026 that 58 aircraft have been effectively lost or grounded since February 2022, representing over 10% of the active Russian commercial fleet. Approximately 800 additional Russian aircraft are currently operating without proper registration, meaning they are flying without verified airworthiness certification. And to keep those aircraft in the air, Russia has turned to a practice that its own regulators have now formally legalized: cannibalization. Cannibalization, the practice of dismantling one aircraft entirely to harvest its parts for use in another, was officially approved by Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency, Rosavia, in late 2022. Aeroflot, Russia's flagship carrier, has reportedly cannibalized at least 25 aircraft for parts, with a further 18 aircraft grounded and awaiting repairs using cannibalized components. A deal between Volga-Dnepr Airlines and Aeroflot involved transferring 8 cargo aircraft specifically to be stripped for spare parts. The safety implications are severe. Aviation maintenance requires certified components with traceable histories. A cannibalized part from a grounded aircraft may have unknown wear, unknown history, and unknown compatibility with the aircraft it is being installed into. As Andrei Patrikov, founder of the Russian flight safety company run Avia, told Radio Free Europe, cannibalization solves the parts shortage problem only temporarily, and the obvious disadvantage is that it continuously shrinks the fleet. The situation has deteriorated to the point where Russian engineering teams reportedly recommended cleaning dirty aircraft fuel filters, components that should be replaced entirely, with brake fluid as a substitute for proper maintenance. This was reported by a widely read aviation telegram channel in Russia and confirmed by RFERL's Siberia correspondent. Between December 2024 and January 2025, Russian aircraft experienced 11 engine failures in 6 weeks, more than double the rate of the 2 months prior, according to reporting from the Kyiv Independent. Emergency landings due to engine and landing gear malfunctions have become routine across the Russian commercial aviation network. Now let us examine the political dimension, because this is where the story becomes geopolitically significant. Putin was not unaware of this crisis. In 2022, the Kremlin launched an ambitious program to build a fully independent Russian civilian aviation industry. The stated goal was to produce 1,080 new domestically manufactured aircraft by 2030, including the Sukhoi Superjet 100, the MC-21 widebody jet, and the Tu-214 narrowbody. The engineers and developers told the Kremlin what it wanted to hear. They said yes, they set ambitious timelines, and then reality arrived. According to verified analysis from Veritica and multiple aviation industry monitors, every single domestic aircraft program has been pushed back, sometimes repeatedly. The MC-21, originally scheduled for serial production in 2024, was pushed to 2025. The SSJ New, scheduled for 2023, was pushed to 2026. The Tu-214, scheduled for 2023, was pushed to 2025. The IL-114-300, scheduled for 2024, was pushed to 2026. By 2024, the government's civil aviation program had already been quietly scaled back from its original target of 1,080 aircraft to 994. The number of foreign-made aircraft in Russia's operating fleet is projected to decline from 738 planes in 2022 to just 319 by 2030. Not because they were replaced with Russian aircraft, but because they will have been grounded, cannibalized, or declared unairworthy. Russia's aviation sector has also begun outsourcing complex maintenance to Iran, a country that, according to aviation safety data, has one of the highest accident rates in the region. This is where Russia's civilian fleet maintenance program currently stands. And the prospect of China riding to the rescue? According to the Kyiv Independent, Chinese-developed aviation alternatives capable of replacing Western technology will not be available until at least 2029, if they arrive on schedule. The Kremlin promised its people a new domestic aircraft industry in 2022. In 2026, Russian engineers are telling the Kremlin they need 20 more years. Here is the strategic picture that Global Faultlines exists to surface. What is happening to Russian aviation is not simply the result of drone attacks. The drone attacks are the visible, immediate layer of a much deeper structural failure, one that has been building since February 2022 and is now accelerating. Russia began this war with an aviation fleet that was 67% dependent on Western technology it could no longer access. It has been cannibalizing that fleet for parts for 3 years. Its domestic production programs are running years behind schedule. Its maintenance is being outsourced to Iran. Its regulators have officially legalized the use of uncertified parts from dismantled aircraft. And now Ukrainian drones are shutting down its air traffic control infrastructure, forcing the closure of 13 airports simultaneously, stranding 14,000 passengers, and producing the largest aviation disruption Moscow has experienced in 2026. Russia is not simply losing the air war above Ukraine. It is losing the ability to maintain civilian aviation over its own territory. The passengers sleeping on the floors of Domodedovo and Vnukovo on May 8th were not just victims of a drone attack. They were witnesses to the compound failure of a state that has been spending its resources on a war it cannot win, while the infrastructure its own people depend on quietly collapses around them. There is a detail in the verified reporting that captures this moment precisely. Ukraine has had no civilian aviation since February 2022. Every Ukrainian who needs to travel has known that reality from the first day of the full-scale invasion. Russia has now imposed on its own citizens, in a limited and growing way, the same disruption it has inflicted on Ukraine, not through external attack alone, but through 4 years of mismanagement, theft, cannibalization, and strategic miscalculation. The drones did not build this crisis. They are simply making it visible. This is Global Faultlines. We track the forces shaping the world, not just the events on the surface, but the structural realities beneath them. What Russia's airports are showing us this week is not just the reach of Ukrainian drone capability. It is the accelerating unraveling of a state that bet everything on a 10-day war, and is now in the 5th year of paying the price. If today's analysis gave you a clearer picture of what is really happening, share it, subscribe, and come back. Because the fault lines are still moving, and this one is getting wider.